right, we are back with another episode of Out of the Rut. I'm Xavier.
I'm Ron.
And today in the studio we have Allan, the archaeologist. Thank you, Allan, for trekking all the way out here to join us in the studio.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. It's a good day to be in from the rain.
I could not agree more. Also, thank you for being our second interviewee in what we call Certifiably Hyped Studios, is what we're calling our little studio space. So thank you for being our second guest on here, man.
Oh, that's good. It's good to. I love your neon setup.
Oh, thank you. I'm kind of giddy about it myself. Humble bragging. I've been like texting all my friends, be like, "Oh my god, look at this!" And they're like, "Okay, cool, great." And I'm like, "No, you don't get it. This is huge, man. I'm psyched about this." I get psyched over the smallest shit, dude.
Where'd you get that from?
Where'd I get it? Online. You know, you search enough, you find some cool stuff, and you donate enough plasma, you can pretty much afford anything, dude. But we're here to talk about you, and we're here to talk about the world of archaeology and just ruts in general. So, as always, we always like to start off with this question there, Allan. Ruts. What are your experience with ruts? Are there any prominent ruts that you felt like throughout your life you've been in that have sort of shaped and sort of put you in a certain direction in life?
You know, I think that's a big question, big dramatic question to start off an interview and a podcast. I mean, of course, you know, we're all experiencing ruts. We have when we're kids. We have them in our adult life. I think the biggest ruts I experienced as a child were one that I was. You know, by the time I was 13, I was reading and testing at a very, very, very low level.
Oh, okay.
Like, you know, like the bottom 11% of the nation. Yeah.
I kind of thought you were going to say the opposite, just being an archaeologist. I thought you were going to be like, yeah, I was really big into books, super smart right out the gate.
Well, I think, but what's the point in talking about ruts? The point in talking about ruts is how you move through them, how you climb out of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you know, and that's a personal life story. You know, sort of getting past the dilemma of not being able to read and keep up with other kids and test well and do all these things. You know, what do? Do you take it by the horns, or do you just kind of let yourself sink into the abyss? You know, sometimes a little bit of both happens.
Sure.
And then I guess the other thing is, you know, when I went to, I grew up in New York City, and I was in public school. I got beat up in third grade. They broke my nose.
Oh no!
And then
right in third grade, Allan getting straight up bullied, bro. Damn.
Yeah, I was in a area of the Bronx, and so my mom took me out of there and put me in a private school.
Okay.
You know, which I thought would be and that went pretty well for, you know, a number of years.
Yeah.
But then by the time I got to 8th grade, it was like intense bullying. So I'd show up for school and have like 10, 15 kids waiting for me in the morning.
Oh God!
You know, and it'd just be
dude,
like, just be like beat on Allan time. You know, it's like they take all.
What time is it? Time to beat the shit out of our boy Allan. Let's go.
You know, they take all my stuff, and then I'd have to like kill the carrier with them.
Dude, that's savage.
It was savage. And then, you know, by the time you get to that 8 a.m. class, you're covered in dirt and blood, and you know, and but at the, you know, and feeling alone, but at the same time like, bring it on! I'm ready. You know, and
makes you resilient.
And after a certain amount of time, you know, you get to expect it, and you get to expect also that you can deal with it.
Sure.
You know, even though it's traumatic as a 12, 13-year-old, whatever. Yeah. But I think that those two things together, I think so much of what shapes us is in adolescence and early adolescence.
Yeah.
I don't. Obviously, there's, you know, early childhood ruts and
sure.
experiences that shape us, but I think adolescence is such a prominent time for humans.
Honestly, adolescence is just one huge rut, honestly. Especially the older you get. Like I'm in my 30s, but like I feel like once I kind of hit 28, you're kind of at that point in life now where you actually have a lot of childhood to reflect on all of a sudden. And when you really boil it down, you start to really like piece apart those different things that have shaped you. You're like, oh God, like it's 18 years of just being in a rut, of just jumping from problem to problem and figuring out how the hell do I maneuver this? They shape you more than I think people really realize, you know, especially once you start getting older and you have a lot of time to reflect.
I love the idea you know, I think it's very prominent in Buddhism, for example, that, you know, the obstacle is the path. So the rut is the path. It's
honestly, that's a great way of thinking about it.
There's no escape from the rut. There's no escape from obstacles. They're with us every day. They hit us every day. Some of these shape our lives, and some we haven't hit yet.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, there's always ruts to overcome down the line, man. The longer you live, the more ruts you're gonna have. And I'm a firm believer that if you're not experiencing any ruts, are you really living? You know what I mean? You got to put yourself out there. You got to take risks, and with risks come ruts.
Well, and what's the greatest rut? The greatest rut is getting older
Hey, honestly,
getting older. I'm a little older than you guys. So I can tell you that
I don't think you are. I don't think you are. I just look really good. No, just kidding. No.
Quite a bit older than you guys, but I think that some of the greatest challenges and the greatest ruts you can get into are as you really get older and you feel your body, your mind, your social groups, all these kinds of things shift and change. So I think that's that's something we don't always expect, but it's inevitable. It's inevitable. I mean, I look at you guys. Big, strong guys, big, strong guys. It's hard to imagine.
At least half of us are.
But that's, but I think that's a challenge and obstacle, a rut a lot of people get into is just dealing with the transformation of the body and the mind over time.
Sure.
It's just, the body and the mind at 50 just ain't what it is,
honestly,
at 20, 30.
No,
it's
for sure.
It's a different world.
No,
it literally is a different world. It's like you're a different animal.
You've completely evolved out of being what you thought you were into something completely different. And I mean, there is something like, it's funny because we talk about this a lot because obviously Ron and I have worked in fitness for a long time and we've met a lot of the people we know either through myself through performing in fitness and Ron through fitness and stuff too. And it's like, that is a lot of what facilitates people into the fitness world is like that realization of like your body isn't capable of doing the things that you're used to it doing and dealing with that both physically and mentally, right? It's like you want to work towards your body being able to do those things again as you get older, but you also have to deal with the mental challenge of like, hey, there are certain things that your body just won't be able to do again. Like I taught a class like 2 days ago and I landed a tuck jump wrong and threw my back out, bro. And I'm just like, yo, I used to be able to tuck with the best of them, dude. I was like tuck jumping all day, but now I do one and I land wrong and I'm like, oh, I'm out of commish for like 3 weeks. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
But that calls the question, and the question in general, like about have I been in ruts? What are the ruts we're in? It's like, what's a rut? Is it self-induced, or are there just ruts that are gonna, like aging's okay? There's a lot you can do to kind of offset or avoid some of the problems.
Yeah.
But look, everybody's going to be in the sort of rut of getting older, the body changing, not being able to move as well, to have the balance to do the same things you did when you were younger.
Yeah.
But then there are the ruts. Like I look at the question about my adolescence and the ruts I was in maybe as an adolescent, or ruts I was in last year or now. And some of these they're self-induced.
Yeah.
It's like life's always flying at you, but then it's also like, well, how do you feel it?
No, that's kind of cool. Like I've never, I guess, funny thing is being a podcast about talking about people's ruts. It's like you can almost categorize ruts into two separate categories. Like you said, the ruts that are sort of like milestones that everyone deals with, right? Aging, things like that. It's like you can do your best to avoid those ruts as much as you can, but at the end of the day, they're all going to come for us eventually. Or there's then on the other opposite end of that coin is like there's those ruts that we don't have control of or that we don't expect coming, that are either induced by ourselves or outside variables outside of our control that we then have to kind of adapt and maneuver around. And
health, financial, emotional, a lot of these things,
they're going to come.
I mean, they're going to come, but there are ways to prepare against them. And there are ways to, sometimes it's really difficult. You don't have the training either in your society, in your family, individually, in your school. You just didn't learn.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa. It's like why don't at the earliest stages of education, why don't they like really teach kids how to balance their emotions or how to balance their checkbooks?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Honestly, I've been saying since I was like since I graduated high school, I was like, yo, I would have wished instead of like calculus, I learned how to like do my taxes, like in school.
Absolutely.
Instead, I know
mandatory.
Yeah, instead I know like sine, cosine, and tangent. And I've never used that shit since. But I'm like, yo, but basic tax math, I can't do that at all. Don't even ask me. But it's true. It's like we prepare for all of these things that end up never happening, while at the same time not preparing us for those ruts that again are baked into our society and into our lives that aren't avoidable.
Yeah.
Taxes and death. Those are the only thing that we can prepare for in life, and I feel like we don't prepare enough for either one of those. But hell yeah, man. Any other prominent ruts that you recall growing up that you feel like, really shaped who you were before we get into the world of archaeology?
I think just going back to adolescence, there's always the there's the social aspect of adolescence, which is very complicated, I think, especially in the United States. The transitions in and out can be very high pressure.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of people I know and a lot of people I've encountered, and I look at my own life, I think adolescence is a good place to go back to and look at like ruts that shape who you are, who you become, paths you take, and so on and so forth. But then I think, other ruts, I think that it's, there's the standard stuff, family, is there family conflicts, or are you going to get the right job? Have you done the work? Is the salary going to be enough? If you, where are you living? Is it working out? There's the classic relationship stuff. I've been married. I've been divorced. I mean, that was I got myself into a rut there. We got ourselves out, but sure. I mean, thankfully I've never had any like deep or long-term or protracted or abiding like health issues.
Sure.
That's something I've like the deepest sympathy and compassion for people who are challenged by like chronic or grave health problems from early ages or later in life.
Yeah.
This shapes everything. That's a rut that's like, that changes your entire frame of reference in your entire being when you have a health issue, and
you can't
on and on. You can't,
chronic.
right? Yeah. I mean, look at the instance of autoimmune diseases today.
True.
I listened to the podcast where you interviewed Dr. Julie, which is really good. She's a really cool person.
Dude, shout out to Julie. I love Julie, dude. She's so cool.
That was a great interview. And you really get a sense for her compassion and so forth, obviously. Everybody listened to it because it's a great podcast.
Oh, thank you.
But people are just, the autoimmune disorders that are just like proliferating now, and people, it's like from all the food we eat and stuff in our environment. And it's like we just can't chronic stress, can't get out of it. I mean, these are ruts like.
These are ruts that break people.
These are ruts that break people. And again, it's it's self-induced to an extent, like it can be, but a lot of people have other genetic issues and factors take place. It's like, so I'm grateful that, at least until later in life, I certainly never had any like autoimmune stuff or anything,
Heck yeah. So avoided those. So far, I have avoided those ruts, which are always kind of on the big ones. But, it's a lot of the standard stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about other ruts, it's like, look, everybody gets in. Like when you think of a rut, you think of something that's deep, like a deep trench, and you're just stuck there and you're like down the bottom of that rut, that trench, and you're just going along and you can't climb up the sides of the walls. It's just like never ending.
You're fighting for air.
And, and that can be like when you're training or you got a job or you're working your way up or you're looking for work or again, chronic health problem. I've worked in Central America for a lot of my life, on and off for the last 30 years. I've lived down there too. In fact, that's where I do live, in Central America.
Nice.
I've been up here for a year for other reasons, but working and living in Central America, it's like you can find there are ruts around every corner. Having everything from clean water to steady electricity, to clean and good food, to good transportation is a challenge. And then there's I've worked with through government agencies there and things like this, and it's things work differently there. Things work differently. The challenges are different. I had to learn Spanish. I started when I was about your age, so it was like a steep learning curve. I wasn't 6 when I learned Spanish.
You didn't have Rosetta Stone or Duolingo?
No, so I was in a deep rut. I was in a deep language rut.
You're cracking open the textbooks, learning the old-fashioned way, bro.
But it makes me think of all the people who have to retrain to go in the workforce, or who are there's something they want to do, and then it's like struggling to do this. And that's how it was for me learning Spanish. And you can't do work down there, deal with the government if you can't communicate with them.
I mean, that's essential.
Yeah. So I would say I've been through a 30-year rut with Spanish, but I manage,
Hey, yeah. I mean, honestly, like, kudos to that. Learning language, especially as you get older, they say is just exponentially harder than learning when you're a kid. And it's something that I've struggled with too, because like when I first moved to Chicago, I lived in a primarily Latin neighborhood in the Hermosa area. And like, that was probably like the span of time when I was probably the most proficient in Spanish, because it was just, I was surrounded by by it, right? Plus, we had Rosetta Stone was really big at that time, and it was like I had all these resources. But like the minute I moved out of that neighborhood is the minute it all went away. Like if you were to quiz me on anything I knew back when I first moved to Chicago in like 2014, I would like not know any of that because if you're not immersed in it and you don't use it, you lose that very quickly.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I wish, if we're talking about like ideals for education, you don't have to force kids to try and learn Spanish or French or German or I don't know, Chinese or whatever
any language, yeah.
But expose them to it and, get that stuff going in the brain, the new neural connections, so that when they're your age or my age or whatever, there's something back there embedded that can, spark up if this is something that's needed.
They have a fundamental proficiency in it to where it's like they could draw from in the moment where they desperately need it, like in emergency situations and things like that. 100% agree.
Look at this country. I mean, this country is phenomenally diverse.
Yeah, that's honestly the one thing that kind of always surprised me. Before we go into archaeology, small tangent, is like for being a melting pot of a country, you think that we would prioritize like secondary language in our education system, because that's sort of like the whole foundation of a lot of what our country is like diversity and inclusion of all these different cultures. You think that would be like, okay, well, if we're going to be that, we need to make sure that people know how to communicate with each other. But it seems like our foreign language programs in our country are sort of like afterthoughts to like what we consider like core curriculum, like math and English. And
I feel like for a long time it was different though. I think, until maybe the last 20, 30 years, I think it was like, well, the idea is to, because it's a melting pot, work into the given system. Learn English, learn these life ways, learn this culture, take part of the culture, become a capitalist, do the best you can do, And,
good point.
Make the money you get, and so on and so forth. And
let's get into some archaeology, though.
Absolutely.
When did archaeology become a passion for you, or like become something that interested you? Was that something when you were being bullied in New York that you were just like, yeah, you know what, archaeology is lit, or did that come kind of later on in life?
So my grandmother and my father were like amateur collectors of like objects and artifacts.
That's
cool. My grandmother was a numismatist, so she collected. A numismatist is someone who studies coins.
I'm very glad you defined that, because that was going to be my next question.
And that's actually a sort of subsection of archaeology and history in general. People who study coins, because you find a lot of coins in historical sites, but even in areas where ancient Rome was prominent. You find them underwater, but you find Roman coins. I was like 9 years old when I was doing that stuff. And
so pretty young age, you were kind of delving into what that
my
was
father
like.
was my father was military, so ex-military, so he had all these he collected all these old military badges and things.
Oh, cool.
I always had to learn about them. So I think that was this interest in history and this is the important thing I think about archaeology and about life in general, is looking at how things represent how we think. Looking at how things represent who we are, our values, our symbol systems, and because everything, including like our dialogue now, is an exchange of symbols, right? So these are sounds that are actually meaningful symbols that are, sounds that are put together into meaningful systems of symbols and words so that we can communicate. It's the same if I hand you an iPhone, this thing is loaded with meaning. Yeah. It's also a utilitarian object. Right. Yeah. So I pass to you. You use. I mean, you see what I mean? There's an exchange of information.
Yeah. It's like this thing in my hand isn't just an object, because there's so much information. Yeah. It's such a multifaceted thing that it isn't just what it is. It is so much more than that, even though technically in physical space it is just this one thing. Yeah, that's honestly kind of that's a really interesting way of thinking about like kind of everything, right? Because like kind of going back to the coin thing, it's like, yes, it's a piece of some sort of valuable metal at face value, but we apply more meaning to it by making it a form of currency and adding sort of value to it through social constructs and things like that, which I feel like is sort of, it's kind of what you're describing a little bit.
No, you're really hitting it. I mean, I'm looking at you now. You have a Stranger Things t-shirt on.
Heck yeah.
I was listening to an interview with it was a German athlete who came to college in the United States to be trained better, right? Yeah. To get good training. And she was talking about like her exposure to American culture, and one of the things she said was, everyone forced me to watch Stranger Things. They said it was like the thing I had to watch. Yeah. And so her idea at 18, 19 years old, coming to the United States was like, wow, this exposure to this super mediated culture of TV and visual media and all the ideas and the language ideas even that are transferred through there, ideas of aliens, of community, of friendship, of, and I think culture is constructed. Yeah. Culture is constructed, it is communicated, it is transferred, and a lot of that happens through material. And that's the basis of archaeology. It's like studying the relationships between objects and how they're meaningful, right?
Yeah.
We're used to talking about Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones was kind of he was a university professor, but he was also a museum archaeologist, which means he was going out into the world and having adventures, trying to gather up these, treasure pieces that were stolen, or right?
Yeah.
And then his famous line is, "That belongs in a museum." Right?
Yeah.
And so we start to think about archaeology as the object, like this one thing, like disconnected from everything else.
From the bigger picture.
Right. It's beautiful. It's gold. It's a jade object, and that belongs in a museum case. But in reality, archaeologists, what we really study is the relationship among objects. So it's like somebody walks into this studio space right now, okay, and we're not here, and they look at this table and they look at this setup. What are they going to think? They're probably going to think this is a podcast studio.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, why? Because of the setup of the table, the relationship between the mics, where the chairs are, the camera, the clock, the acoustic material, and
Yeah.
And they're going to get that immediately. But let's say they walk in and there's no camera and these three things are missing, but everything else is the same. They might
assume something else.
Right? Do you see what I mean? So everything depends on the relationship between objects in space and the way we interpret it. And I know that sounds weird, but that's the basis of archaeology. Context and the relationship between objects. And I think the important thing, we want to talk, archaeology is cool. And I think what I've done is cool. I investigate ancient cities and I dig up, I don't take this for granted or take it lightly, but, I dug up burial contexts and things like this, and done a number of other like dangerous. I've done dangerous things in excavating architecture. That's we're on 10, 15 feet underground, and there's tons of material above me and things and that's all exciting. I've had broken up smuggling rings and had the people from the government recommend I carry a weapon, and things like this, and just all the other odds and ends stuff. But I think that one of the things we can take away from thinking about archaeology is just how do we think about our day-to-day life? Like, what do we bring into our life as material objects? What are these things made of? What do they symbolize? What do they mean to us?
Yeah, and is it going to hold that meaning years later for whoever, like you said, whoever finds it later are they going to have? They're going to then have to do that sort of puzzle work for themselves too, and be like, okay, cool, this is what this thing is. What meaning did it have in relation to what is surrounding it or the society that kind of?
Well, look at how we've begun over the last 60 years. There's that famous line from The Graduate. You ever read that?
I have not seen The Graduate.
Movie The Graduate. Did you see that, Ron? No. With Dustin Hoffman.
I do know Dustin Hoffman's in it, but I've never seen
it. It was a famous movie. I'm not trying to date myself because that was even before my time. But it's a famous movie because it's like this young guy who's 22 or something, and he gets in a relationship with an older woman.
Sure.
So there's that sort of sexy, cool aspect of it. But it's really about a young guy he's trying to find his way through life at 22 years old or whatever. And he's at a party with his parents, and he comes upon some friend of his father's, and he says, "What are you going to do with your life?" He's like, "Well, I don't know. I'm thinking about this or that." And the guy looks at me. He's like, "Plastics." Like plastics. This is this is the future. Get into plastics, and that's funny because that movie was made sometime in the 60s, maybe 1960. I can't remember. I don't know.
Yeah,
it was before. Like I said, I think
if you know in the comments, throw it in the comments.
But look at how in the last 60 years we've constructed our world around plastic.
It is true.
It's everywhere, and only in the last several years have we begun to see like how we're becoming plastic. It's like there's a literally like a spoon, a tablespoon worth, and I'm not saying a tablespoon like what it holds, but like if you can imagine a plastic spoon, there's plastic spoon worth of plastic in our brains.
Ooh. Gosh.
I mean, So I mean, just the idea that even, to an extent, like they said a lot of the crazy zaniness of the Roman emperors, some of the crazy shit they did, right, was like inexplicable. And then there's, some people came up with the theory, well, they were using a lot of, in the pots and the cups they used to drink and prepare their food, there was lead.
Yeah, so how much of that
was that's one of the theories.
Yeah.
But this idea that we are what we interact with. We are what we make.
It is a part of us, whether it's actually in us or if it's just something we interact with. It is very much a part of us. Now that's so fucking cool. The way, like, that is an interesting way of thinking about that. I honestly, that's kind of my favorite part about a lot of these interviews is that, like, I feel like a lot of how I think about and like interact with the world often changes with people's perspective, especially one like this, because again, like, I could take all of this for granted as it is, but it's like, it's true. There is so much meaning to each individual item that's in this room because I myself set up the room where I bought the plant. And it's like,
look at how proud you are of this, as you should be.
Yeah. It's giddy about it. Super psyched. No, that's so fucking cool.
But this is like, the etched and inscribed stone as you walk,
this is my Rosetta Stone.
As you approach the throne room.
Guys, nothing else will be added to the studio. I'm just psyched about this fucking sign, dude. So interest in archaeology came at an early age. And Ron, as always, you know the drill. Just throw a question out if you interrupt, just because I could just ramble. We got into archaeology at kind of a young age through your grandparents, through their collection of stuff and sort of interacting with that. Like moving into like the school years for Allan and like high school and college, like what was the education process for you? What was, obviously you said you kind of struggled with a lot of certain aspects with school, but like what did you find that you excelled in that really helped propel you into this career? Or what were some things that you struggled with and what were the steps that you really had to like take in order to get good at those things, in order to kind of see improvement in your field?
Well, I think that for some of the reasons I mentioned, I wasn't always a great student. I was actually bored a lot. I thought
I can relate to that.
Yeah, but I did enjoy. I thought history and literature were fascinating. Math was pretty cool. But it was never like. You weren't like a textbook academic. We all want to be excited. Yeah, we all want to be passionate and excited. I think it wasn't until I got to college and I took a course in Intro to Anthropology, and we're studying the evolution of. Sounds crazy, but the whole course was like the evolution of non-human primates. So we studied the evolution relationships among primates going back 20 million years, and it was the weirdest course because it was almost like my grandmother's coin collection. I had to, where I had to categorize and organize every coin. I had to categorize and organize every single primate from not just across the world at this time, but going back in time, all the fossil evidence for little monkeys and little tiny animals and larger animals, and to see, what's the evidence. And of course, when I was doing that then, and even still to this point, because it's really, it's really difficult to get DNA from fossilized bone.
Okay.
But so most of the study was what we call morphological, or looking at the morphology or the shape or the anatomy of the bones and the skulls, and saying, okay, this animal related to this animal related to that. And of course, you're getting these animals from this deposit, which we know is 10 million years old. And then there's this deposit over here, maybe in another country, another part of the world that's 5 million years old.
Yeah.
And so you start to, and you say, based on the bones, this had to be like a large-brained, tree-dwelling thing that ate mostly fruits. Based on the dentition, you can tell these things. 3 million years ago, you start getting some of these things are like they're walking upright.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then a million years after that, you start having evidence of tool use, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And when you look at it all together, it is a story. It's a story of trial and error, of lines and lineages of animals growing up, becoming extinct, continents separating.
Shifting,
it's just crazy stuff. It's like the island of Madagascar has a species of primate that that is not found anywhere else in the world. Lemurs, they're called lemurs, and that's because Madagascar separated off from the main part of the continent 75 million years ago. And everything was trapped
on that island.
Everything was trapped on the island, and there are these cool little animals, you know?
Yeah. Well, sometimes most of what I know about any sort of archaeology is either from Indiana Jones or Jurassic Park. Love those movies growing up. But sometimes the connection that like archaeologists and anthropologists, et cetera, are able to make through bone shape and things like that. I always find it's because I don't understand it is what it is, but I'm always like so surprised like the one where like dinosaurs are more related to like birds than like actual lizards.
Right.
It's
that's
like
so cool.
It's like how do you look at these two bones and like, yep, this leads to this 100%. It's like what do you look for in the bones that tell you that story? And like you said, it's through the teeth and through the
to address your question more directly is, so I'm studying this like the evolution of primates like over 20 million years until you end up with what we are, It's just an incredible thing. And then thinking about that and being able to study it all made me start thinking about, well, we know how we've come to use tools. We know how we've come to, how the brain is expanded and how we've come to walk upright and how we've come to form the social groups who are doing all this. But where did consciousness come from?
Yeah,
that fascinating.
Like the self-awareness piece of
exactly.
We think of ourselves as sentient beings.
Exactly.
Like, when did that happen?
Exactly.
That's cool.
And symbol systems, and starting to do notation, and starting to talk about and think about the moon as meaningful, and follow the phases of the moon, and the sun becomes a deity. And writing systems develop, and we start expressing, communicating ideas, and creating histories also for so then we get, once we start creating histories, recording histories, you start to create this template for memoriam and for commemoration of previous generations and previous actions, previous battles, previous states, cities, lineages, all these things. You record them for all time. That's like, a whole other level of wild. Think about it, because before I don't know, maybe it's really hard to say at this point because there's so many debates, but before maybe 10, 15,000 years ago, we didn't have these kinds of symbol systems to exchange ideas between and among one another. Yeah. And some people would argue going back 50,000 years is when we started notation and symbol systems, like through the rock art. Yeah, you've seen some of the caves in Spain and France, but also some objects that were carved and have notation. But then you start getting written language and things like this in the more recent past, and that's just that's when you get the formation of societies and states and empires and people who can manipulate histories. Right. Yeah. Once you can start manipulating the symbol systems and the symbol systems that draw on the emotions of a society, and then if you can record them and pass them on to later generations, that's power. It's a wild thing.
That is cool. Like, God, like I'm at a loss of like other words to describe it other than just the fact that it's so interesting.
Building on that, look at the society we live in today, where you have so many currents of thought and opinion regarding the Christ.
Sure.
And a lot of fundamentalist Christians and many Christians in general, quite frankly, will tell you that the world was created 6,000 years ago. Yeah. That's an area of thought that is very powerful. Yeah. It tends to squelch or squash a lot of other thinking in certain areas. Look, archaeology ultimately is, I think, about, as many fields are, quantum physics, neurophysiology, it's about like, what is reality? Yeah. Like, what is real? How do we interpret it? Who's to decide what is real, what's absolute, and what is truth? Does truth exist? Is there some absolute truth and everybody's got to stick to it? And if you don't stick to it, off to the gallows with you, Yeah. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about archaeology, whether it's archaeology practiced on ancient civilizations from 2,000, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago, or we're looking at, as I've been able to do some work on the edges of work on slave plantations, looking at and in many cases overturning some of the long held truths about relationships and agency, like who has power, who doesn't. You had some of the enslaved African American communities in the South and other parts of the United States actually exhibited enormous agency that we wouldn't have and empowerment. Through the continuity and preservation of their own culture that we've never given enough credit to, and I think archaeology, literature, of course, and oral histories also, but archaeology has had a big part in looking at some of that stuff
and providing kind of answers and filling
also
in the gaps.
Especially also in Native American studies and Native American archaeology, which is probably, I would say, the most contested area of archaeology in the United States.
Is it really?
Oh yeah. There's they've during the Clinton administration they passed laws mandating that museums around the country begin to give back human remains, but also sacred objects to Native American communities. And so the Native American communities just had to file formal requests.
Yeah,
and I mean, I got my PhD and my master's at Harvard, and they have a famous anthropological library there called the Tozzer Library. It's a really cool thing, and I used to have my little desk in this long bank of windows, and I'd look out on the street because I was usually always, I'd be so deep into the material, always looking for some distraction, and the window helped me to, I could justify my distraction and then get back to my work. But one day I was there, and there was attached to the library was this huge museum, and that had been around for 150 years, working in so many, working with objects excavated from many different parts of the world, but including the United States, a lot of Native American stuff, including Native American human remains. So I was in there up on the second floor, and one day this 18-wheeler truck pulled up. And I'm like,
Jesus, okay.
Yeah, right in front of the museum entrance. It's an otherwise very quiet, very staid, Harvard sort of street, and very quiet. Yeah, and this 18-wheeler truck semi pulls up in front of the museum, and I'm like, what is going on? And then I saw they were starting to load all these human remains. And they were going to repatriate them or bring them back to the native communities they were from. And actually, this truck, had remains from like dozens and dozens of tribes and cultures from around the United States. So I believe what this truck actually did is it was like one of, how you can, if you're moving somewhere and you only have enough, like a studio apartment worth of stuff, you can just rent space on a moving van. That's got it, right? And then there's 50 other people who got their stuff on there, and it makes stops. That's what this did.
Dude, that's crazy.
It was making stops at tribes.
Just touring the nation of museums, just be like, yep, right. It up, yep.
But it just shows you the extent to which also, archaeology has taken part in a lot of exploitation. Yeah. We haven't been, we're not like the great liberators. I think archaeology is much more into sort of liberation, freedom, non-exploitation today than it was, say, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Was much more like we do what we want, we take what we want.
I mean, I imagine at the time, like, and you would obviously know better than I would. It seemed like at least archaeology at that time was very much finders keepers type vibes. It's like, oh, you found it, it's yours, and it's like, okay, now as we've kind of progressed decades and decades past that, it's like, okay, just because we found it and took it maybe doesn't make it ours. Maybe we should give it back to the people who it actually belong to. I think I'd read something a couple months ago about a lot of stuff from like ancient Egypt, people having opinions about that. Of like, oh yeah, we just have random mummies and stuff, and it's like, should we though? Like, maybe we should give these back to the Egyptians because it's actually like their culture and like their stuff.
Well, then the argument was, well, the Egyptians, they don't have air conditioning in their museums. They don't have the, they don't have the security. They don't have the funds for the security. Well, they certainly do today. I mean, I can tell you that one of the big debates today in archaeology, in that sort of thing in archaeology, is the Elgin marbles. So the British Museum, which is probably the most famous big archaeology museum in the world, has these marbles that were taken from Greece generations ago. Yeah. And, they're beautiful, they're carved, they're like, they are Greek national patrimony and treasure. Yeah. Greece wants them back.
And it's like, what grounds do you really have to like keep that?
Right.
Like, it's like,
right.
It's like, well, we found them, and it's like, okay, but like, how did you find them though? Okay, like let's peel the layers back here.
Exactly, but it's weird how you get, because then that, just that little thing, just that little slice shows you the hierarchies that are built into relationships among countries in Europe.
True.
Like Greece is still, Greece was like one of the greatest nations in the world, and consisting of many great nations way back when, but has been more impoverished relative to other European nations in the more recent past. So it's like, well, we're the ones who preserve this. We've done all the work, studying them and preserving them, and should we give them back?
Yeah.
So anyway, you see this all over the world, but the United States is a great example of where we've put into place laws where this stuff has to go back. So I'm very interested in material, in the symbolism that's built into materials, how it's meaningful, how it's meaningful for me, how it's meaningful for you, how it's meaningful to cultures. And I think that's an overlooked part of archaeology today. People just want to think it's sexy. It's like the aliens.
I want to find some crystal skulls and shit, dude.
That was one of the shows that my old girlfriend was her favorite show. The what's it called, Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, dude. Honestly, I used to binge that shit, dude.
I think she met me. She's like, yes.
She's like, yeah, I get to hang out with this guy all day and you just talk about cool alien shit, dude. Hell yeah. Honestly, don't hate it. Probably would do the same thing. I'd be like, hell yeah, sign me up. But moving in, any questions you want to throw in there, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, you were throwing in some numbers like 20 million, 50 million, 10,000 years ago. Something that always interested me is how do you guys get those numbers? Like, how do you determine how old something is, and like how do you know it's accurate?
Yeah, I mean there are two ways. One is sort of abstract, and that's like if any one of us goes in the backyard and we dig a hole straight down, you're going to find that there's layers. You got the layers from where the leaves and the grass died last year, and go down to where the leaves were the year before, and then you're going to go down and you're going to find maybe some sand, and then you're going to find some clay. It's logical to assume that the stuff that's at the lowest part of your little pit that you're digging was deposited earliest, right? And that the stuff up at the top is more recent. So this is like the law of superimposition.
Okay.
And there are some exceptions, to believe it or not, and it's not like Alien.
Yeah.
but by and large, if you dig something straight down into a geological deposit or on an archaeological site, by and large, the stuff you find down deepest is going to be earliest. So in terms of studying relative dates, right, we can tell it, okay, something that's way down at the bottom is going to be earlier than something we find higher up in the pit. But then we also have high-tech means for actually testing soils, testing bone, testing carbon. There are tests where we can look for how what was the magnetism on Earth at a certain time, because that shifts over time. Okay, and that's actually is a chronological tool for archaeology, right? I know it sounds crazy.
It's like some high level shit. Like mine and Ron's brain are like bending and breaking, but it's cool as shit.
Yeah. There are literally a dozen very high tech methods we use to test deposits or soils or objects that we bring out of the earth, and they will give us these absolute dates. Now, to say something's 20 million, I can't tell you that I or any other archaeologist couldn't tell you, well, that's 20 million and 5 days.
Like the exact. Yeah, this was January of year one.
There are ranges of error. And
10,000 years ago, this would have been January 3rd.
Yeah. And so there are all these different, technological methods for doing this, or high-tech methods for doing this. Some methods are just for the period of the last 10,000 years, others for the period up to, say, 500,000 years, others for a period of millions, and if you can use a couple of these combined, then you eliminate a lot of the error, a lot of the uncertainty, and you can start to narrow it down. So that's basically how it is. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, it helped a lot. Obviously, like dinosaurs, like, this dinosaur lived like 500 million years ago. Mm-hmm. And obviously those things were taken like probably 20, 30 years ago, and like archaeology was a little obviously less resourceful than it is now. have you retested things to see if like that was more accurate, like it would be more accurate today than it was like 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Absolutely. That's done all the time. I mean, it's just like, and I don't want to pick on you, but I get this all the time from my family and from my family's kids. You know, they think that I'm a dinosaur person because I'm an archaeologist.
Yeah.
But
that's definitely what society has painted.
Archaeologists, like everything we've discussed so far has been about stuff, material, symbols, this human stuff. Yeah. Dinosaurs are that's in the realm of paleontologists. So people who study like the origins of early animals. If I could be a human paleontologist, in which case I'm studying like early humans, like Homo erectus and Australopithecus and Lucy the upright ape, in Ethiopia. But archaeologists mainly study human material culture. And we try to derive meaning, process, evolutionary change in society through looking at material culture.
Honestly, that's a really important distinction because like I'm kind of in the same camp as Ron, where it's like archaeology is sort of given this blanket definition of just like if it's old and it's in the dirt and it's tangible, you discovered it, it's archaeology. Like I definitely thought they were kind of all kind of the same thing.
It's more of like the discovery of like the human past, but like I don't know.
I didn't. I was just like, hey, it's all discovering any shit.
Yeah, so we're not dinosaur, but you know the funniest things my cousin's kids will say to me, they'll say, "Oh, did you find any dinosaurs?" And I have to say, "Well, that's a paleontologist, not an archaeologist."
Yeah,
and then they'll say to me, "Well, what does an archaeologist do?" Which I'll say, "Well, that's funny. You know, the last archaeological convention I went to in Milwaukee, we drained the entire Hilton, Hilton of all its beer."
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm an archaeologist, my guy.
I said that's funny. We do drink a lot of beer, which is funny to me. Is archaeology is one of the academic. Archaeology can be done in many different ways. You can do it for the government. You can do it for a museum. You can do it on TV, as I've done in a lot of archaeology on TV. You can be a university professor, et cetera. But one thing's for certain, archaeologists spend a lot of time together. It's very social. Yeah. I think it's more social than people who are physicists and mathematicians and experts in literature and so forth. They spend they spend time in their groups and so on. But we spend time in trying circumstances together, often for months or years, working on these things. And so you get very close to people, and one of the ways you cement the social fabric or burn stress and so on is you all have a few beers. So we're known as being liking to have a good time. Archaeologists are known to have a good time. But back to your question is this happens all the time. We get a new technology that completely overturns what
everything gets retested.
It gets retested if it's of interest, right?
Okay.
It's like anything, whether it's politics today or Silicon Valley or Hollywood or whatever. It's like what is found to be meaningful at the moment. That's where people push the funding.
Yeah, there's a priority.
It's the same with archaeology and science. It's like if this is like look at all the money that's been poured into breast cancer research really in the last 10 to 20 years, where in the middle of the last century, that wasn't the case.
Who gave a shit?
It was like women's health.
Who cares?
Yeah. So it's the same in archaeology. So if someone's problem, requires getting better dates or thinking, is that really right? Like a good example is the peopling of the Americas. Like there was everyone thought that the Americas were peopled from Asia across the Bering Straits sometime around maybe 15,000, 20, between 14 and 20,000 years ago, somewhere in there. Now we know that people started finding human remains and human culture all the way down in Tierra del Fuego, in South America, and also in parts of the United States dating 30,000 years ago. So like that, and then of course all the archaeological establishment was like, no way, our explanation was how would they have gotten here? They had to come by land, and then people are like, well, what if they came by boat? What if they had boats?
Yeah, they're trying to tell a story based off of the new information. It's like, okay, now we have this thing. We know this is to be a fact. How do we bridge how do we fill in the gaps now?
And so a big part of that was going, and they're finding this stuff, and they're be like, no way, the dates are wrong. And so then it was like, okay, let's refine our techniques, let's refine our methods, let's really test that stuff date-wise. And sure enough, now we know that there were people in the Americas, way farther back, probably at least 40,000 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Damn.
No one. I know. No one. Who knew?
Yeah,
Who
right.
knew?
Yeah.
And it's
So the story of like what Adam being like 10,000 years old, like does that?
well. That's the no. But I mean, this is the.
Because that makes you question things like that. Like when you're finding something.
I was gonna say, is that sort of like a lot of like? I was gonna go into this question a little bit later, but like, are there any like religious archaeologists where it's like, oh, I'm an archaeologist and I'm known to like study the past and like and these objects that are supposedly whatever, but I'm like deeply religious and like believe, like, you know what I mean? Like how I don't know how those things can coexist.
No, there are.
Knowing this information and believing this other thing. You know what I mean?
There are. You know, I worked in Israel in the Levant.
Okay,
for
yeah.
Palestine, Levant, that whole in the Near East for 4 years, and a lot of the people I worked with were so-called biblical archaeologists. So they used the Bible to create hypotheses that they would then go and test. They'd want to go find that ancient site in Israel or Egypt or Jordan or Lebanon or wherever, and test those ideas. Like, see, okay, can we find the site? Are these the people who were there? Is it true? Is there evidence of this great battle with between the with the Canaanites or whatever, whatever culture it is. And so a lot of those people I met, they abide by like the biblical dates of creation and all this sort of thing.
And they sort of use their knowledge in archaeology to sort of help relate it to the Bible or whatever religious affiliation they are.
Yeah, and a big part of what some of them do, not all, but some of them do, is it's like they'll go and do archaeology to prove that the Bible's real, that the Bible stories are real, which then if you keep peeling it back is the story of Jesus is real, right?
Yeah.
And was he a real person? Did he do these things? Did he live in this area? Was he oppressed in this way by the Romans, etc.? And then peeling it back or reeling it in, more or going back further. Well, we'll see the Son of God. This is ultimately what a lot of biblical archaeologists, not all, but many are interested in. It's like trying to prove and test the the veracity or the truth in Bible stories, and of course the existence of Jesus. Yeah. So
that's interesting.
So that's but like I said, when archaeology and antiquarianism, as it was called, like in the 18th century, it got going a lot. This is exactly what people were doing. They were like digging down through layers of dirt and find and like a lot of these people were from farming communities. I don't care whether you're in France or England or the U.S. or whatever. They were from farming. Thomas Jefferson was an incredible scientist and archaeologist, early archaeologist. But he was also, he owned a plantation. They were farming there. So all these people, these early scientists, they knew soils that came from agrarian and agricultural communities. They knew what soil was. They knew how long it would take to create a soil. So then you'd find, you'd have these people going and digging down through the earth, and they're finding human remains and objects made by humans down deep in layers of earth that couldn't possibly be a few thousand years old. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this makes no sense. Like something, do you know what I mean? Like, there's no way.
That doesn't make sense.
There's no way these soil layers were created in the last, in just 6,000 years. There's no way. And then especially when they're tied into like more complex geological deposits, like, that have to do with rock and sandstone and all this sort of, that stuff doesn't form like that.
Yeah, it's not instantaneous.
And so then we're immediately start talking about geological time, and we talk about the origins and the evolution of humans in the context of geological time, because we're talking about our species being somewhere between 150 and 250,000 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a reasonable amount of time to
see these
deep
things.
Deposits. Yeah, to see that sort of change emerge.
Damn, that is cool.
That's a great questions. Great questions, Ron.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hell yeah, man.
It's like look at all the cold cases in criminology now that are being solved around the U.S. from DNA technologies.
Yeah,
right. They're finding they saved the DNA evidence over 30, 40, something.
That's how they found the Jack the Ripper. Didn't they just
Ancestry.com and all that shit?
They did. He was the barber.
That's a man.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
Ancestry.com and all that shit.
I guess it was like a blood on a jacket that somebody still had.
I know. I had heard about the blood on the jacket.
Yeah,
that
so
said.
they're grabbing it, testing it, and they found out who it was.
And then what you find is you find the descendants of these people.
Yeah.
And then you like wind it back. And
I will say that is both the cool and scary thing about like DNA technology and like how it's advanced, especially within the last like since the 90s when it really became prevalent, is like you could submit your DNA to ancestry.com and shit, and you could find out like, oh yeah, dude, your great grandfather, serial killer, straight up. And we have his DNA that has just been sitting in a cold case box for like 3 decades. It's like, oh God, holy shit. Part of me almost doesn't want to know. I'm almost like, oh, ignorance. I'd rather just not know. Let's just say start fresh.
No.
The curiosity is what gets me.
You want to know if you have brothers and sisters or whatever else, or if you have genetic diseases.
Yeah, and like that's the part you want to know.
But now, just let's flip this and think about archaeology as kind of doing similar things. It's like okay, this is a taken for granted truth. We've always thought about this group of people or this migration, okay, or whatever. Let's test it. Now we've got these new technologies, and we've got new data. Let's test it again.
Let's run it back.
Enough, we find like, whoa, let's run it back. It's like, whoa, wait a second. The first people in the Americas weren't up here in North America. Maybe they were down in South America. Maybe the migrations came from south to north, now north to south. Maybe. I think that look at the colonial movement of the Portuguese and the Spanish into the New World, like in what's today Mexico, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, all these cultures. Yeah. These people, these European cultures thought, oh, these people are like, they may not even be human.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sure enough, we now know that like the ancient Maya created massive stone cities in the rainforest without draft animals, without metal tools,
with a lot of what we use today as far as like infrastructure goes. Like,
and they discovered the concept of zero, right?
Yeah.
Thousands of years before it was,
like
used
widely accepted.
Yeah, the Romans, the Roman numerals, they couldn't achieve the same complex mathematics that the ancient Maya had. The ancient Maya had such complex mathematics because they had the concept of zero, which allowed for completion. Right?
Yeah,
which allowed them to.
That is weird.
It's like the Romans had that. Is more of, and there are little tweaks and nuances to this, but they're more of a linear running count. Whereas the Maya understood that things run in cycles. Yeah. And you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? Completion. Yeah. And so they began to study the movements of planets and the movement of themselves around the sun. So the Maya understood very early on that, we moved around the sun. It wasn't, that wasn't something that was understood in Europe until, about 500 years ago.
Yeah.
Less. So,
God damn that. I guess you're right. It's so weird, the concept of how like, oh yeah, that's so long ago. And it's like in the world of our species, it's really not that long ago that we figured that out.
The ancient Maya, 1,500 years ago, were able to calculate the length of the year to the 4th decimal point. They were able to predict eclipses thousands of years in advance.
And I can't even do my taxes, Allan.
No, but this is what I mean. It's like if it weren't for archaeology, we wouldn't understand the immense accomplishments and achievements of other people and other cultures around the world. We would only think Europe's the most power. Of the legacy and descendants of European culture.
It would stop there.
Is like but there have been immense and amazing contributions to the great story that is humanity.
Yeah. So how long have you been professionally an archaeologist for? I probably should have asked that earlier, but
I would say. I probably since I was 19 or 20. I think
throughout your archaeology career, like, have you felt like at any point any of these discoveries have really challenged your frame of thinking specifically in what you believe to be true versus needing to adapt over time? Like any one particular that jump out at you that you're like, oh, I believed this, and then we found this out, and it was like, I was like, shit.
Well, look, I'm going to be really blunt.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really blunt. I mean, I would say that one of the most vital things, and this is something I learned in anthropology and archaeology as a whole, because archaeology in American academia tends to be practiced either in archaeology tends to be practiced in anthropology or in, say, a classics department, or something like this, Greek, Roman. But I studied anthropology, and I'd say one of the biggest things I learned is that the stories that get written, the histories that get written are written by the powerful. They're written by the people in
the ones who
charge.
see the other side,
and you know, it tends to be in the history of the West. It tends to be white men. And I'm not going to be politically correct or anything else here. I'm a white man, and I've enjoyed and I enjoy my status. It's or that's the way it is. But I had to learn that women are marginalized, not just in work and in society, but in the archaeological record, in the histories. It's like,
really,
it's like women's work, for example, in history is completely under considered,
and not even really talked about.
And if you look at the data just from women's labor today, sorry, but it's like women tend to do like almost twice as much as most guys. They've got 2 jobs and they're managing things in the household if they got kids, and everything else. So I think that I came in archaeology and in anthropology thinking, I'm just I want to be the adventurer, going and looking at things. And I had give me my head, my whip. I had my interesting questions, but then it's like, wait a second, the stories that have gotten constructed over time about like whose culture is best, who's most important, who's got the best brains, and all this is it's not just false. It's like it's poor. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad because it's like the world in history is so much more rich and diverse. It's like the United States had one of the first codified, institutionalized schools of science in the world. It was called the American School. It was founded in 1830. It was founded as a school of race science. So one of their primary goals was to understand the relationship between all these people who look differently, right? You got the Chinese, the Asians, you've got the Native Americans, you've got the blacks, the African Americans, you've got the Caucasoids, the Caucasian people. Yeah. And so this area of like institutional science was created to figure out how they were ranked, right?
Sure.
Who was smartest, who was most capable,
who was quote unquote superior.
Well, and who was human. Okay. So just think about this. Yeah. This is crazy. This is America. Do you know? But this is like the first school of science in America, like first institutionalized, codified school of science. And what they did was they took the skull and they'd fill them with mustard seed. Right. And see, how much mustard seed they literally take the skull and there's, you've got the hole where your spinal cord goes into at the base, and they'd fill it with mustard seed and then they'd pour it out into a graduated glass or a measuring cup. And then they'd say, okay, well, whoever has the biggest brain, because that's measuring the brain, that's measuring the space of the brain. The larger brain means, now, men tend to be bigger than women, so there was also always assumptions that men were smarter because their brains were bigger.
Yeah, because we have bigger dome pieces. Yeah, we can fit more mustard seed in this bad boy, dude. Nothing but mustard seed up here, man. Dude, I'm a fucking genius with all my mustard seed.
Thank God for anthropology, and especially a guy named Franz Boas and others after him, like in the early 1900s. Who starts that there is no way to distinguish intelligence and superiority based on race. Race is such a small factor. Now we know. It's like 0.06% of our genetic material. So not even. I mean, it's a tiny,
not even a full percent.
A tiny percentage of our genetic material accounts for skin color.
Yeah,
I mean it's
but that was like exclusively what people based any opinions on.
That's right.
Because it's like, it's what we see. It's what we see. It has to play a role, and it's like, just because we see it doesn't mean it has anything to do with any of that shit.
No, racial distinctions are cultural, and if you go to Brazil, you're going to see a completely different thing. If you go to Spain, you're going to see a completely different set of cultural assumptions about skin color. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that race is not meaningful. Yeah. And there's also a difference between race and ethnicity, but that goes beyond the where we are here. But anyway, we're going far afield maybe from.
No. I mean, I think it's important to distinct too that because again, I have zero experience in your field, and especially not to make this political. I feel like I say that a lot in this podcast every now and then. It's like, I don't not to make this political, but there is a lot of conversation around the importance of our identity as both racially and as human, and where we fit in this, and what that means to us as individuals. And it's like, it's important to know that these things that make us look different don't play a role in our worth as people, or our how smart or quote unquote dumb we are. Like, that has nothing to do with any of that, and it has so much to do with other things that have, again, just zero to do with that. And I think because it is such a obvious thing to see in an individual, right? Whether you look at someone and you can tell, oh, they're not white, they're not black, they're not Asian, they're not whatever. It's like we tax so much. Again, we tack so much meaning onto this thing because we see it and it's the thing we can acknowledge, when really, in reality, it has very little to do with anything. And so I think it's important to talk about that.
But I also think if we're talking about archaeology, it's important to understand that, and nobody thinks about this because probably very few people know, especially out there in the public, that a big part of how anthropology and archaeology grew as like things to do was because these discussions about race. And hierarchy among races, and testing, like, is that real? Is race real? Are there cultures that have immense value in and of themselves, like on par with our own, even though ours is seemingly so much more complex?
Yeah,
and so. I don't know. I just think that's like I said, people don't all understand that archaeology is based on like a lot of the material culture of symbol systems and how we interact with one another, and also that archaeology and anthropology came into being around discussions tied to race.
Yeah. That's interesting. I again, like, just I wish that was kind of something that was more talked about, because like I feel like knowing that is sort of like the precipice of where like true archaeological discovery and questions have really stemmed from. Like, it does kind of paint a picture. It paints a much broader picture and a much more clear picture of what you guys, or what archaeologists do, and just sort of like the foundation of where you guys stemmed from to where archaeology is today, and the questions that you guys are looking to answer now. Like, I had very little understanding of like that is what archaeology really stemmed from, or the questions that it stemmed from.
Yeah. I mean, it's Indiana Jones is great. That's cool stuff. It's like, I remember seeing that as a kid, and it certainly propelled me.
Sure.
It was like, wow, this is cool stuff. Once you're hit with the reality of having to study so much and learn so much, and then if you want to be a university professor and get funding and all this, you got to get a PhD. Yeah. It's like, wow, is it really that fun?
Yeah. Do you want to dedicate that much time to more schooling and things like that? So I know we're getting close to time, but I'm sure Ron has a couple more questions. I have a couple more questions too. I'm trying to think how to, like, we're throughout your like academic experience and your professional career, did you have any like people that like really inspired your career, or really inspired your thinking and your philosophy around archaeology over the course of your career?
I mean, that's a great question. They're always, and I think it's always teachers. That's why it's a shame teachers tend to be undervalued, like literally underpaid in our society. But the impact they have is so immense. Kids spend 7, 8, 9 hours in school.
For 18 plus years, sometimes longer if they go to college and higher education. So
I had one. I had a professor in one of my first years in college who was archaeologist and anthropologist, and he studied primates and human fossils from millions of years ago and all this. But he was interested in like the arms race, the nuclear arms race between Russia and the United States. That's ongoing, weirdly.
Weird.
And so he was all about. He was a scientist interested in human evolution, but he was looking at human evolution from the standpoint of, are we going to survive? Like, are humans going to survive? Like, I mean, whether we're talking about pandemics, or we're talking about all-out nuclear holocaust, or an asteroid, or but asteroid we can't necessarily. It's like that's like one of those ruts that's not self-imposed.
Can't really do much about those.
But I mean, look at this. What's going on with Iran right now? I mean, this is supposedly the central question. There is reducing Iran's ability to make nuclear weapons. This is an ongoing. And so anyway, this professor, he had, he was like all about studying and learning all the details of human evolution, studying all these fossils. But at the same time, he had this like compassionate heart. He was interested in that the line of human evolution should continue and that we don't destroy ourselves. And so he had all these interesting proposals that he published regarding like massive hostage exchanges between Russia and the United States. Like if you send, 500,000 students over there and they send 500,000 here, every few years.
Yeah.
And they're actually, each country is invested in the long-term health and longevity of the other, then we can start to talk sense.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was amazing when you anywhere where you see like, and I appreciate this also in that interview you had with Dr. Julie was, the importance of combining like science and analysis with a compassionate heart. With an idea to, preserving and tapping human goodness and carrying that forward into the future, using all the latest tools and technologies that we have,
Yeah, it's funny because like in that conversation with Julie and even here, it's like it's one thing to find the answers. Mm-hmm. It's another to ask yourself like, what is my motivation for wanting to find those answers? Like, is it compassion? Is it wanting to help propel us into a brighter future? Is it, in Julie's case, is it to help the individuals who are struggling more, or is it transactional? Is it because I just want to have the knowledge? You know what I mean? It's like, what is the motivation for finding the answers other than just having them? Because like at the end of the day, like to find out that, the human race has been around for 200,000, however many years, it's like just to know that fundamentally, like for yourself or just for the sake of the knowledge doesn't really help anybody. But it's like, hey, what can we use this information now that we have it? What can we use it for to help propel us into a brighter future or help us understand who we are more so that we can have a better futures? We can fundamentally lead ourselves into better outcomes,
Absolutely. And in the case of that mentor, I had a very good relationship with him. But then there was, once I got to Harvard, I had a relationship with a professor, one of my professors. It wasn't very good. And I think she liked me and she appreciated me, but she was very tough on me. And I think that I learned a lot through that. Like she was a scholar of feminist archaeology and feminist anthropology.
Cool.
And I think at one and the same time, she saw me as someone who was really investigating and struggling to learn and understand those concepts, while at the same time she saw me as like, a white male who's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so while I had issues with her and like she'd rubbed me the wrong way and I could tell I rubbed her the wrong way, and this is the point I want to make, is that sometimes our mentors aren't always who we think they are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes our mentors are those people who were tough and they, we didn't necessarily have great feelings or warm thoughts about them. I think often we want to cite our mentors or list them or whatever as the people who we had great relationship with, we love them. And
they were like my best friend.
Yeah. But sometimes, it's like, she put me in ruts. She put me in a rut sometimes and forced me to climb out of it, with my wit or with my intellect or in other ways, And sometimes the people, I know this, it sounds crazy, but maybe it's appropriate to the podcast, is that sometimes the people who help push us down into ruts are the people who are helping us grow the most.
I was going to say, we often learn the most about ourselves through struggle. And sometimes those people who put us in that struggle are the ones who help us or at least facilitate us or push us into learning more about ourselves and how resilient we can be.
Yeah, and she was also my boss at a certain point.
And I'm sure that sucked. I'm sure that sucked too.
It was terrible. It was terrible. I mean, it's the worst, man. Especially when you see, like in any work environment, she'd favor others, and then I was like the persona non grata.
Yeah,
and it's like how and why do you want to work to be better in your boss's eyes? And sometimes the important thing is to allow yourself to be in that position of lowliness. And to test your own self-worth, your own self-value, and your resiliency, right?
I think it's cool too, because like you bring up a really good point about mentorship and like our relationship with mentors, because it's true. Like our desire for answers often comes with questions, and those questions often come from someone telling us that we're wrong or being hard on us and being like, hey, this isn't right, or you're wrong, blah, 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 or like essentially putting the mirror to ourselves and being like, hey, you're the problem. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm the problem, then I need to find I need to ask the right questions to then find the answers. And it's like someone, not only like more often than not, the person who is agreeing with you all the time and being like, oh yeah, you're perfect the way you are. Like they're not forcing you to ask any questions to then find answers for it, in which case you're just going to stay where you're at. You're going to stay stagnant.
Yeah.
So you need those people who are going to essentially, like you said, put you in ruts, so that way you can then find the drive within yourself to find those answers. And
I think that's one of the great things about archaeology and about science and about new technologies, is that it forces us to confront in new ways all the myths, because basically everything we see, whether it's politics, our history, relationships between the sexes, all this stuff is written into like accepted narratives, over long periods of time.
Yeah.
And so I just think science, archaeology, technology, these things are great because they force us, for better or worse, to have to like turn up the dirt and like look at these things in new ways and challenge the myths, challenge the accepted narratives.
The questions, just because we find the answers doesn't mean the questions stop. We ask new questions after that.
Yeah.
We keep on searching.
Yes, sir.
That's cool, man. That's fucking cool. Ron, you got any more questions, brother? Throw some more out there.
Is there a culture or civilization that you think deserves more attention?
Yeah, or just personally that you would love to dive more into.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's a, I'd say probably the greatest. I don't want to use hyperbole, but like one of the greatest civilizations, definitely in the history of the world, was in the ancient Andes. Okay, the Inca, for example, and some of the cultures that preceded the Incas. So they lived at like 14,000 feet above sea level. Okay, they built cities up there, and they didn't have cars, they didn't have horses, and they often had to span these unbelievable valleys between mountain ranges, right?
Yeah.
And what did they do? They built these rope bridges that were like some of the greatest engineering feats ever accomplished in the history of the world. And they built an empire that covered hundreds of thousands of square areas. The Inca were so powerful, they would up and move a city of 200,000 people from one area of the Andes 200 miles to another area. Okay, that's how powerful they were. They would just say, "Sorry, we have a different design for this area.
We're just not vibing well over here, dude.
We want you. You're all gonna up," and then they move them. And
that's crazy.
But they did it without a writing system. They had no written language.
Dude, that's nuts.
It's incredible. And it
was only oral.
It was only oral. In fact, the Aztecs in Mexico did not have what we would call a typical or conventional writing system either. And it's amazing what the Aztecs were able to do. But in the Andes, it's just amazing. What they did have is they had this system of colored strings. And they would have one string here, and then they would have strings tied and hanging down of different colors, and they would knot them at certain points.
Okay.
And these things were called quipu. And what they did was they recorded information and history and transactions and economic issues important to the empire and important to merchants and historians. I mean, it's just amazing. So I think that's one culture that really deserves a little bit more attention. I think we all think of the Romans, the Roman Empire stretched. Whoa, the Inca were at another level. Literally.
Give the Inca some love.
Give them some love, dude. Absolutely,
man.
Give the Inca some love,
dude. That's crazy, though, man.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a discovery that you had that you were like either surprised, either terrified you, or just like made you think a little bit?
I think about, it was like 15, 20 years ago now. I was excavating at an ancient Maya city in Honduras where I've done a lot of work. And I was outside the center of the city. And in the center of the city, you find the tombs of the queens and the kings and the princes and the nobles and all this. And they're extraordinary. These tombs are like, multi-level with stairs and there are temples on top of them and all this. But I was excavating outside of the city, and I was, I just wanted to explore some questions around architecture and the growth of the city and some basic things like that. But then we found this tomb that was so complex. It was on the level of one of the highest elites or the royal members from the center of the city. Yeah. So, and never before, at first we didn't even believe it. I remember we'd come down. You come down through these levels and layers, peeling off huge ashlar masonry and fill and stone and gravel and all this. And then we got to this point where there are all these organized, huge stone blocks and in an organized way. And we're like, whoa, this is weird. And then we're scratching our heads. I'm looking at my assistant. I'm like, you know what this looks like? And he's like, it looks like a big tomb.
Oh, yeah.
So we're like, but how do we find out if it is without opening it up?
Sure.
Because you need government permission from that. You need funds for that.
Yeah.
You need time.
Yeah, sure.
I was a university professor. You need time away from that. So what we did was we did something really high tech. We got a ball of string and we tied a 4-inch nail to the end of it, and we made a little bitty hole in the dirt between these huge blocks, and we dropped the nail through there, and we just reeled it out, right? We just reeled it out, and we were expecting a
couple feet.
It's probably just like a few inches down or something where it's going to hit dirt and it's going to stop, but it was like 10 centimeters. 10 centimeters, like 5 inches.
Yeah.
10 centimeters, 20, 30, 40, 50, 80.
It's still going.
A meter, still going.
Damn.
We're like
that has to get you fucking giddy in the moment. You're like, you're doing,
No, but it's to answer to your question, it's like, it made me scared. I was like, oh shit, like I'm not ready for this. Like this is like, I've got to be back teaching in a month, I can't find a tomb right now.
You're like, not now, man.
And also it's like, what are people going to think? Like this is not supposed to be here. Like there can't be. And then it's like 1 meter and it's like, okay, this is going to stop. And it's just going to be like a shallow, like a little grave thing,
A little shallow
it's like
grave.
120, 130, 150. 2 meters. It's like 2 meters. Okay, that's 6 feet. That's taller than I am.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a huge space under there. All right, keeps going down to 3 meters. Okay, so it was, and then all of a sudden we could hear it through this little hole. It was going tink tink, down on something, on stone.
Yeah,
it was going tink tink on stone. We're like, holy shit, there is 10 feet of open space underneath these stones.
Dude, that has to be fucking crazy.
It was crazy. And so then I was like, oh my God. So then I applied for emergency funding to National Geographic. I applied for funding to my university. I contacted the government. It became this big deal. When we actually discovered it, it was like headline news in 70 countries.
Shit.
Yeah, it went on the AP and the Reuters wire. And I worked for Colgate University in New York then. And we found this thing, and it was just like this unbelievable tomb in a place that it wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah, no one had any idea or expected it to be.
And sure enough, when we finally got down there, it was this enormous, like it's elaborate, vaulted, stuccoed, painted tomb. And the guy had been sitting on the floor cross-legged with his hands like this.
Oh, shit!
And over time, and he was wrapped in a textile, like a tight, fabric cloak or something to keep him upright.
Yeah.
And then over time, the fabric decayed and his body fell over his right thigh. So we found his spine over his right thigh and his head. Weirdly, we thought at first it had just rolled off.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing was the head was like set up in the center and was facing us, and the skull was painted red. So we're like, huh. And it was only after that, and this is after months of getting funding and problems and people fighting me and the government saying I shouldn't, the government saying, suspending my project and all kinds of things. And what we found was that this entire tomb structure, this elaborate thing, was built for re-entry. So they buried this guy in there and they basically built a temple around him.
Yeah.
In such a way that you could get back into the tomb in later generations and do things with the bones. And then it was then I understood that this was part of ancestor veneration. So the idea was to build tombs and graves so that your children, your children's children could go back in and perform rituals with the bones, with the old man's bones, with the great grandfather.
Yeah, they were accessible, ready to go.
They were accessible.
Yeah, they were accessible. They were ready to grab.
And in some cases, maybe even taking an arm bone, and that arm bone would grant you rights to lands. Right?
Okay.
But in some cases we think. Yeah. But minimally, what they were doing is they were going back in and they were using the bones for rituals to celebrate their ancestral line. And so we found that they had gone back into this tomb like 50, 70 years later, and used the skull in rituals and painted it red.
Got it. So that's why it wasn't. That's why it was set up. It wasn't on the body. It wasn't like rolled over. Yeah,
exactly.
Dude, that's crazy.
It was
shit,
crazy.
dude.
It was crazy. And the crazy thing too, excavating that whole thing was wild because we had snakes and rats in there. I mean, we even had a rat. I had to catch. I mean, I caught so many rats. We had a rat cemetery in a tree nearby.
Jesus Christ!
It's like there's so many rats.
That is wild though, and like it's. I like, again, that's like the shit that I like people like normal people like me like fucking dream of. Just like, oh yeah, I want to go to like some temple or some whatever.
But it's
and just
scary.
like
what I said is it's also, it's so much work. When you find something like that, that means it's like, that's like the next 10 years of your life.
Oh,
you know, shit. It's like, oh no, I wanted to change professions, and like become a singer.
Yeah. I wanted to host a podcast, but shit.
You can't ignore that stuff.
You can't ignore it. You can't ignore it because once you find it, word gets out.
Knowledge
and then people, not only that, but people are going to come in and loot it.
Oh, you have a looting issue. Got it.
So that was the other thing. The moment I found it, I had to get the funding to pay for security.
Because what would happen in the case where you didn't? Does it just essentially kind of just become public domain and like whoever like they could just like ransack it?
Yeah, because like I said, this was outside the area of like the ancient city center, which was a protected area of the national park and all this. And this was like right on the edge of an area that was like some farmers' fields.
Sure. So like it
people
wasn't
wandering
protected.
around. Exactly.
Got it, dude. That is crazy shit, though.
Yeah.
Dude.
I've got 100 stories, all that stuff, but it's been fun talking about.
I mean, it's been fun fucking listen to. I've been enjoying. Like I'm like a little school child hearing the tales.
That was a good question. Do you have another one? I don't mean to take your.
No, please.
Yeah. If you could excavate anywhere in the world, like unlimited funding.
Wow.
Where would you go, and what would you want to find?
What would you hope to find? Yeah.
Oh my God, Ron. That's
like bucket list.
Yeah. After I left academic archaeology, being a professor and all that, I went into TV and I started working as an archaeologist on TV. And I got the chance to spend 2 months in China working with National Geographic on a show there. I think that if I had the chance, and China's got a lot of unlimited funding for some of this stuff now. Because China's expanding so rapidly, and they're building out so many cities that they're finding so much stuff. Like they're digging out huge craters so they can build skyscrapers, and they're finding cities there they never knew existed.
Oh, like underground, right?
Yes, the Chinese.
I've seen some of those, like trees and like ecosystems and stuff too.
They're the hottest area of world archaeology right now, I think, is besides the theoretical aspect, the stuff is in China. Yeah. Like China's going gangbusters. So I got to work with all them. So I think if I had the chance, I would love to go back and work in China for like years and work with the archaeologists there. They're super nice people. They're like in their offices there, everybody's like smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey. It's a very different culture.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. You can't, not only you're not allowed to have cigarettes in like academic buildings here, but if you were to like drink whiskey around your colleagues or students in
it's a little frowned upon.
It's frowned upon. So it's just it's a different culture there. I don't drink whiskey or smoke cigarettes, but I appreciate that camaraderie there and the and part of the reason they're drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes all the time is because these guys work so hard. They're like working around the clock.
Yeah.
And
they're hustling.
They're hustling.
I will say, like, it does seem like from an outsider's perspective that like Asia as a whole, like they take their ancestry very seriously and like the discovery of these things very seriously.
You have hit it on the head. Like the way China has 4,000 years of continuous civilization.
Yeah.
I mean, no shit. Okay.
Yeah,
there was a period of like few dozen years at most where the Mongols came, the Khans, Genghis Khan came along and they conquered China. But the crazy thing is they're like, everything works here. This system is perfect. Let's leave it.
Yeah, so let's not change anything.
They left everything intact and ruled it, from inside.
Yeah,
and
which I feel like is very uncommon when you look at like other conquering countries. It was like burn it all down, build it, rebuild.
Exactly.
And it was not
whatever's going on in China, it's worked for a long time. And it's
pretty obvious.
And it's worked pretty well. And they have enormous respect for that history and that cultural trajectory in ways that, for a lot of obvious reasons, we don't. The so-called U.S. culture's only been here for
a couple hundred
years.
Yeah.
And
very young when you really look at the longevity of some of these other countries and
when we came in, we tried to erase what was there before.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have far too little respect for what was here before, because I think we could learn a lot, especially around sustainability, especially around community. Especially around community, and also I think a lot around child rearing, relationships between sexes and genders, that could quell and calm a lot of the frickin' conflict and debate we have today. But anyway, so history in China, and like you say, and in Japan, I mean, they can trace like potters, ceramic makers in Japan, like going back hundreds of years.
Damn, it's crazy.
It is crazy. I have a friend of mine from Korea. They're a Buddhist family, and she can trace her like Buddhist roots going back like 600 years. Do you know what I mean? That's just a completely different way.
I can't even track my history to yesterday, dude. Let alone 600 years. That's fucking cool.
Yeah,
that
it's really cool. So I'd say China. I'd go back to China or but I think China, just because they're pouring so much money into it, and like you said, money's
money.
You need money. You need money.
Yeah, if you ain't got money, no projects exist.
Are you still like traveling and stuff?
Yeah, I still have. I'm finishing up a project in Honduras at the same site.
Okay.
In fact, it's that same project.
No shit.
20 years later, we're still trying to. But in the interim, there was a coup, right? Mm-hmm. The Congress got the army to wake the president up in the middle of the night with a pistol, and they put him on a plane for another country. Oh, wow. And
those things will affect.
And then there was martial law in the country, and then I couldn't take students for years in there, and it was the political situation was so. There's basically a good 5-6 years there where I was just like, you
couldn't do much.
Can't work there. Yeah,
got it.
So we deal with those sorts of things, but I would. So I do. I still do work there. I'd like to finish that.
Yeah.
And have done, and because then, for every day we dig stuff up, it's 3-4 days in the lab.
Yeah.
And then it's another few days like writing.
Yeah, documenting and just making sure it's all being able to be. Being able to be transcribed and written down.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the work of archaeology. Is like, because you've been in it for so long, do you feel like what would you like to see changed in the archaeologist community? Is like, there's something that you're like, I wish we would look into or take this more seriously, or maybe this is something I would change about the industry or the world of archaeology if I had my way.
That is an unbelievable question. And it's actually more a perspective issue. I think that we, by and large, 99% of archaeologists look at archaeology, like the stuff we dig up, as if it is the past. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what I would suggest is that we start to explore the concept that maybe the past doesn't exist. Okay?
Okay.
In a few different senses. So, for example, can you identify for me right now the past? We are in a continually unfolding present.
Yeah, the minute the second pass, it becomes a part of the past.
We live in the present.
Yes.
Okay. So as archaeologists, that means that all this stuff we dig up and the stuff we the stuff we prioritize to go dig up, these are things that these are present priorities.
Yeah,
we want to go study gender relations in an Indian Pueblo community, or we want to study the evolution of technology in ancient Babylon, which we can't really do anymore because the Near East is so topsy-turvy. But you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because technology is like a highlight of things we think about today. Gender relations is like something we're thinking about all the time today. So these become our priorities in looking at the past. So I think from the standpoint, first of like, how do our brains work? Our brains exist in a constant, like ever unfolding present.
Yeah.
All right. The past doesn't necessarily exist.
It's just another thing we just tack meaning to, but essentially isn't a thing really.
Right. And if you think about how physics and quantum physics has reframed like how we think about the universe, existence, time, space, everything, I think that one of the things we've learned through like quantum physics relatively recently, like in the last century, is that time is something that is questionable.
Yeah.
You know, where that literally right now across the world, humans, scientists, physicists are debating whether time is real. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you from everything I've read, and I'm not a physicist, but I can read some of the basic stuff. There's a very strong argument that actually time is a human construct. Not just that time is relative, but time is a human construct. And that the nature of time, especially as it's tied to space, is much more complex than any of us in our day-to-day survival mode, going to work, feeding the kids, than any of us can contemplate.
Yeah.
So I would say for archaeology, I think we need to ask ourselves from the standpoint of these three issues. One, that so much of what we do as archaeologists is like around our present concerns. Two, that, neuroscience is telling us a lot about the present situation of our consciousness. And then three, quantum mechanics and quantum physics is questioning the entire existence of time and the past and the present and the future.
Yeah.
So as archaeologists, why are 99% of us always going around saying that's the past, this is the past, and that we can reconstruct the past? I would argue that the past is a construction. It's something we are constructing and modifying. You can never look, you can take down the tables in this room, right? Yeah. And then send me back in here, or you can come back in here yourself. There's no way you're going to put them back together and put everything in the same place again exactly as it was.
No.
You cannot reconstruct any previous moment. I mean, it's not possible. So the way you're going to do it in any given moment is going to be a new construction. And that's what I think archaeology is. And that's where I think archaeology needs to go, is towards challenging that most central myth of what we do, that the past is real and that we can reconstruct it.
It is. It's weird. That's so fucking crazy.
Well, I think it challenges the idea of these absolute monolithic truths. And what it does is it says, like, history, our past, our everything we think about ourselves, these are dialogues.
Yeah, these are ideas.
They're ideas, and they're dialogues among ideas and people through time, and in the present. These aren't like, we can't construct these myths that just sit there, like monolithic, like whatever, the Lincoln Memorial or whatever it is. Or your sign, which is going to be that is going to be a testament to time.
Yeah, dude, that's my monolith right here, bro. Hell yeah, dude.
But just that all these things we think and we do and we believe they're not just like monolithic truths through all time. That investigation, science, history, relationship, it's a dialogue in the present. And as archaeologists, what we're doing is we're having a dialogue with all this stuff we wrench from the earth and we try to interpret, and the meaning that stuff has for other people, we then come in dialogue with them.
Yeah.
And the meanings that they're assigned change. And it's just like anything, whether it's the meaning of Hollywood, the meaning of the presidency, the meaning of Nashville, whatever it is, these things change through time. I don't mean to be trite, but anyway, I think that's
a great fucking answer, dude. If anyone was interested in diving into the world of archaeology, like what are some key pieces of advice that you'd give them if they were interested?
Well, it's a great question. I think there's just one point I'd like to make first, and that there's like at least like 6 different ways to get into archaeology. You can be a contract archaeology, like working for a private company that gets government contracts, county, state, federal, whatever.
Oh, cool.
And you go around, you do work because they're expanding a military base, or they're building a housing development or something, and you've got to go and rescue whatever's there,
Yeah.
That's like contract archaeology. Then there's a museum archaeologist, someone who works in a museum and they study stuff that's been gathered there. Then there's like, there can be an academic archaeologist like me, like someone who's a professor and you're publishing stuff and you have theories and you teach students and et cetera, et cetera. So then you have some people who have like just a BA in archaeology and then they write books, or a PhD and they write books. So you can publish books.
There's a lot of avenues.
You can there's a lot of avenues. Or like I was a TV archaeologist. I did a show last fall. so you can make money that way as an archaeologist. So just to first make the point, there's different ways as an archaeologist to make a living.
It ain't just one track.
And I've made significant amounts of money both as a professor and as a TV archaeologist. So, and I have worked as a contract archaeologist. It was struggle to pay my bills then because I was a peon.
When you're getting paid, you're getting great.
Well, I was
when
getting, like $7.25 an hour. But that is the people who own those companies make good money. They do make good money, and then you can obviously make money. So returning to your question, which is what would someone do or how would someone go about it?
Yeah.
I think the most important thing if you want to become an archaeologist is you gotta have an interest. I mean, it's like don't get into it if you're not really like curious.
You got to be really kind of nerdy about it. You
because
really dive in.
It's a lot of academic work, and it's a lot of you can go really far in the field and still not make a lot of money.
Really?
Even as a professor, I didn't make a lot of money. I had friends who'd been in it for 30 years who were making at some points less money than I were just because they were at a public university and I was at a private university.
Oh, okay.
So it's not you're not going to make a fortune doing it, but you can make a living.
Yeah.
And in some cases, a decent living if you supplement, by writing a book or doing some TV or whatever.
Diving into some other stuff.
Yeah, but you're not like if all you want to do is make a million or $1 billion, then find something else.
Yeah.
But but if it is something interesting, you got to have that interest. You got to have the curiosity. You got to have the passion, and you got to not in all cases, but in many cases, you need to like love spending time just looking at stuff. You got to ideally also you like being outdoors. A lot of stuff is you gotta spend a lot of time outdoors, and you gotta you have to like working in groups of people because you're going to be working in a lot of groups of people, whether it's actually excavating and doing this stuff. There's always a lot of people involved, and even in labs, you're there with like 3-4 other people, and not everyone likes that. A lot of people like if they're going to study something, they just want to be in their own little private
left alone,
whatever.
let me do my thing.
Yeah. So I think that the most important thing that's needed is A, passion, and then B, some direction.
Okay.
Yeah, some direction, and anyone is certainly free to reach out to me if they're interested in becoming an archaeologist, or if they have an archaeologist, or if they have a kid who's interested in it. Certainly, they can reach out to me.
That kind of leads us to our the shameless plug time. Yeah. If anybody wanted to reach out to you with more questions, or even check out some of the television stuff that you've done and things like that, how would people look you up, reach out to you, things like that? Shameless plug time.
I've got an Instagram page, allanmacca.archaeologist.
Cool, nice.
And that's probably the easiest way.
Yeah.
And I've got a few pictures and things on there of some archaeological work.
Access to anything you've been a part of and stuff, all on the Instagram page.
Yeah,
sick.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Mind spelling it up for the
pictures of my dogs.
Oh, dude, I wasn't in it for the archaeology, dude, but I'm in it for the dogs, man. I'll check out some pups. Mind spelling your social media in case people have questions.
ALLAN like Nancy, M like Mary, ACA. .archaeologist.
Cool. And we'll make sure to put it in the description for the episode too. So that way it's a quick little link for people just to be able to click on. But that's kind of all the time we have for Out of the Rut. As always, we have our subreddit, r/outoftherutpodcast. If you want to submit your own anonymous stories for us to talk about on air, follow us on social media, Instagram, now YouTube, now that we have our studio. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good shit. But as always, I'm your boy X.
I'm Ron.
And this was another episode of Out of the Rut. Y'all have a fantastic week. Peace.